Hi, everybody. Oh, boy. Small group. Thank you, Jack. We are here in the southern cone of South America. Waters flow freely and clear from drops to rivulets, from rivers and on out into the sea, where the steady bickering of macaws echo and shining eyes zero in on the backs of your head in the black of night when you least expect it. Listen. This is the sound of species once threatened or completely eradicated, making their way back to their rightful places. Grasslands and forests stitching themselves back together again, waterways with species largely unknown, creating highways of life often invisible, but they form the bedrock that sustain both human and wild communities. People once cut off from nature and often truly their own traditions begin to thrive again. This isn't some idealized future. In Chile and Argentina, we have seen it because we have lived it. All of these possibilities are on the move across the southern cone and heading north up through South America. If I've learned one thing in my 76 years, it is that the first step of repairing damage is to see it with new eyes. I think this is how the impact that we've had on wild nature enters our bloodstream such that it is impossible to turn our backs to it. So how did I get here? Working for Yvon Chouinard as he started up the Patagonia company in the 1970s, I learned something we would come back to over and over again. There is no good reason to do things how they've always been done. I came from an old ranching family, but found myself in a world of climbers, ski racers, surfers, all with a counterculture lifestyle. We saw ourselves not apart from of nature, but rather of it. It was this ethos that began to form the realization that we had a responsibility to defend those places we love. This required a very deep cultural shift, even in our own minds. Until then, the sole relationship between business and the planet was extraction. But maybe, just maybe, we could change all of that. And we did. It was so clear to us that if you are fed by wildness, you have to be willing to defend her. As Edward Abbey said, sentiment without action is the ruin of the soul. By 1990, 20 years into my life as CEO of Patagonia, I began to feel restless. I wanted to move towards something I couldn't quite put my finger on, something bigger, more difficult, more extreme. It was the great irony. I had the title of a lifetime in what is still one of the best companies on the planet. I was happy and I was very good at what I did. And yet something in me was already on the move. Then I ran into Doug Tompkins in southern Argentina. A world-class adventurer like Yvonne, Doug was also a self-made entrepreneur. He started the North Face and then the Esri company with his former wife, Susie. But by the time I met him, Doug's growing internal conflict between the destruction of the natural world and making fast fashion had hit a crisis point. He sold his share of their business and committed himself to spending the last third of his life protecting nature. He came into my life like a lightning bolt, I have to say. In 1993, I retired from my job as Patagonia, though I never have left the board. I just had my 53rd anniversary at the company. Packed up my beach house and moved 6,000 miles to the south on an empty coastline in an ancient temperate rainforest where they were being logged at an alarming rate. We lived in a roadless area shrouded in rain. It was rugged and difficult. No electricity, no phones, and it was exactly where we wanted to be. Doug being a bush pilot, every move we made was by plane, and because of this, we were able to see what many couldn't. This unique bird's eye view gave us a visual map of this incredibly complex territory, and we could understand the threats, but also the promises of this wild part of the world. This determined where we committed our funds, and together with many Chileans and Argentines, we launched a 33-year expedition to acquire many of the landscape jewels of these countries, to make sure they will always be places where all are welcome, and very importantly, all are safe, returning them to the public in the form of new national parks. Through our land purchases made by our family foundation and other like-minded philanthropists, along with agreements of governments of both countries, we have created 16 new national parks. A 17th will be signed next October. We've I don't get over it either. For just under 16 million acres, actually about to go over 16 in October, plus over 30 million acres of marine no-take zones. And I apologize that we put that figure in acres, but we can never decide how to express to people how big these territories are in the marine world. In neighboring rural areas where steady work is historically scarce, nature-based economies are slowly expanding and providing dignified lives for new generations who otherwise would have to flee to the cities to find work, an old problem. We humans have been extracting from nature at such an alarming rate, and she is ailing, and her wild children are dying off. Today, the fallout is starkest in Latin America, where biodiversity has declined by 94% since 1970. In the face of this, we realized that saving land was only the beginning of what we needed to commit to. As the writer Lois Chrysler said once, landscape without wildlife is just scenery, and we never imagined ourselves as being in the scenery business. We had to understand what was taking place inside these protected areas and hold ourselves to it. This was a revelation to us, actually, asking ourselves, who's missing? By 1997, we began by working with keystone species, because without them, nature becomes skewed, out of balance, and the chain of life begins to break down irrevocably. In the absence of predators, herbivores can overgraze, damaging grasslands. Smaller predators can begin to have an outside impact on fragile species. And in the absence of seed bearers, like red and green macaws, wildlife-stricken areas cannot possibly regenerate on their own. And even when we do introduce a species back into the system, they can only be successful in their ecological role if there are sufficient numbers of them. All to say, it's complicated. A web of life built on interactions and interdependency, built on relationships, not individuals. Rewilding is not for the faint at heart. In large part, it requires a leap of faith, disciplined observation, field biologists, people who know how to work with wildlife, and they know what to do when something goes wrong, and I can tell you, something always goes wrong. I've had my heart broken dozens of times doing this work. Just last year, Akai, a young female jaguar rewilded in the dry Chaco forest, went missing just 2 weeks after we released her. Her collar slashed, was found at the bottom of the Bermejo River. The shooter identified, but more importantly, the incident provoked outrage throughout Argentina, and a massive public campaign to hold poachers accountable was suddenly born in a country for the first time. Akai will never be forgotten. But this heartbreak also propels all of us forward. I have always thought it is from our failures that we learn the hardest but clearest lessons, the ones you simply can't turn your back on. And this, I think, is the source of some of our best advances in the world of rewilding, a field which is still actually quite nascent. Our job looks like this. For example, in Chile, painstakingly bringing back the timid Andean deer down to 1,500 individuals, the last 1% of their original population found anywhere due to constant hunting over the last century. In Argentina, we committed ourselves to bringing back jaguars within the 2 million acre Ibera National Park, extinct from the wetlands since the 1930s. We are bringing back the Andean condor, puma, guanacos, reyes, native grasslands in Patagonia, the giant anteater, pampas deer, the Darwin's frog, the bare-faced curassow, maned wolves, the collared peccary, marsh deer, protecting the last 3,000-year-old alerce trees, red and green macaws missing for over a century, ocelots, the red-footed tourist, Gracilaria algae, I finally got that right, and the giant river otter, just to name a few. Oh. Today, we work with 35 species, and we know this number will continue to rise with new projects out in front of us. It's very important for me to say that while this work is usually attributed to Doug and me, it's actually propelled by a small army of team members of Rewilding Chile and Rewilding Argentina, the two legacy organizations of Tompkins Conservation and the Tompkins Conservation Team in the United States, and then an untold number of regional and national leaders. Thus far, we've worked with 15 presidents and counting. Most importantly, though, it is the local communities who actually make these protected areas possible. They will be the last lines of defense in 100 to 150 years, if sentiment about the importance of protected areas begins to dim. We call them the geniuses of the place, and we mean it. It also takes tough and experienced leadership, and boy, are these women tough. We've worked together with Carolina Morgado, the leader of Rewilding Chile, and Sofia Henonen, the leader of Rewilding Argentina, for 30 years. A few years ago, I felt strongly that both organizations should become independent, succession planning for generations to come. I'm proud to say that not only do they lead the work that Tompkins Conservation began, but together we're expanding far beyond the ideas and commitments we made many years ago. So, over 3 decades on, and there's still one question that really keeps me up at night. What's it really going to take to change the end of this story? This isn't a static question, but one that keeps evolving with the times and our unending effort to understand how nature actually works. Here's an example. In the past couple of years, individual species have begun to disperse beyond park boundaries. Jaguars, giant anteaters, condors, and others with growing populations are, as they should, be on the move. Tracking them with GPS and satellite collars, we know who's dispersing and moving into areas that would not necessarily welcome them, and this is the problem. It was time to think deeply about what a new generation of conservation and rewilding must look like. If you're fortunate enough to be successful at what you do, these new questions have to emerge. We know that constant critique of our strategies is central for us. And now the bets on the table are much, much larger. We needed to stop for a moment and face the obvious next step. Whether it is bison crossing outside the boundaries of Yellowstone to their peril, or giant anteaters dispersing north out of Iberá, how do you design rewilding strategies that consider wildlife dispersal outside the safety of these long and beloved protected areas? We know the velocity of climate impacts is in overdrive. Sylvia Earle, Sir David, among many others, have made it very clear that oceans are being decimated and mated, and rivers being turned into highways of production. We felt we needed to adjust our own long-term strategies and move much faster. How do we increase the impact of everything we do? How do we pass this hard-won experience on to other organizations so that these results can multiply? How to remove our hard-earned resilience or reliance on the geographical borders of the parks we've created? How to move past our self-imposed vision of rewilding within the confines of national parks? Wildlife doesn't understand nor behave according to the lines on a map, be it the borders of a parkland or the borders of nations. So, 18 months ago, we decided it was time to build a new plan and execute the work inside Chile and Argentina out into a continental scale. I have to say, for all of us, this was an epiphany, and I have to admit, very daunting. How on earth could we design a 25-year plan that goes beyond the borders of national parks, beyond the borders of nations? This was an enormous kind of mental Rubik's Cube for us. We took maps, stripped away all the border lines, and redrew our destinies as conservationists using rivers, mountain ranges as our territorial guides and goals, working across a much larger canvas. So, here it is. As I said at the top, 33 years ago, we began with the creation of 16 national parks in Chile and Argentina. restoring ecosystems to be whole, ecologically functional, and helping local communities revive themselves. Today's work continues on this solid foundation, and we never take our eyes off the projects in the territories where we began. But in Argentina, a new project called Jaguar Rivers Initiative is using the blueprint from Rewilding successes in Ibera wetlands and the dry Chaco forest to follow the species I mentioned, who are already dispersing through river corridors up the Paraná Basin, an area of 2 Alaskas, by the way, to reconnect Argentina with Brazil, Bolivia, and Paraguay. Thriving ecosystems and a full complement of native species with nature-based economies that bring community benefits. That's the plan. Jaguar. Jaguar Rivers, Rewilding Argentina, is working with nonprofits from Brazil, Paraguay, and Bolivia directly to make this happen over the next 25 years, we hope. In Chile, the new strategy means sharing the expertise gained in Patagonia to support rewilding initiatives all the way to the top of the Andes from the bottom of Patagonia. It starts with repopulation of guanacos in the central valleys of Chile, bringing reyes back to the Altiplano of Bolivia and Peru, and bringing the Andean condors all the way back up to northern Colombia, where there are very few individuals left. And right now, we build a new national park at the southernmost tip of the South American continent, Cape Froward. We are securing vast peatlands and offshore kelp forest ecosystems that are the powerhouses of carbon sequestration. And finally, we all know that land conservation is meaningless if we don't protect the seas. Sir David is quite clear on this point. So our marine conservation efforts are also expanding. Multi-year marine expeditions throughout Chile and Patagonia are finally documenting marine biodiversity of that country in the south, including giant kelp forests and its threats. This is all for the very first time. At Patagonia Azul, Rewilding Argentina is tracing the journey of dispersing whales to better understand their territories and where existing protection falls short. Armed with new data, we work with governments to safeguard these global treasures. I feel, honestly, if we can secure the southern waters of our planet, reaching toward Antarctica, we continue to have a chance. As we've begun to expand beyond borders, we also create new networks of new communities, authorities with a common purpose. And I think this is the way forward. And as I said, we're never going to lose sight of the work that we've had standing in Chile and Argentina for the last 30 years. We need to see these territories with reverence and clarity of their original inhabitants. Go back to the beginning with the value of the bird's eye view, throwing out political maps we've always taken for granted. This is the work not of a first generation, nor even a second, but perhaps a fourth and maybe even a fifth generation of rewilders. I have to say, I'm incredibly happy and finally mostly calm because I'm part of a plan that I won't be around to see completed. And that's the kind of long-term vision I like. Thank you. Finally, we press ourselves to adapt to whatever nature is telling us. Follow the rivers, we say. understanding this new language of ecosystems, not politics, is powerful enough to propel all of us forward. And for me, I know one thing. I want to be on the side of history that falls toward goodness, toward wholeness, beauty, toward dignified human communities, and always and forever, wildness. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Bravo. I seem to have lost Jack. There he is.
Yeah. Perfect. Don't you love this woman?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. You want to sit and talk?
Sure. I'm delighted.
You're going to be around tonight so people can meet you and talk with you.
Yes, of course.
I like that. You inspire me. Doesn't she inspire most of you? Okay. I'm sure.
So I would like to say one thing that I've not had the chance to say to Jack. Even though I think I understood 17% of what I listened to this morning and early afternoon. Okay, maybe 28%.
30. Give it 30.
Okay,
30.
I'll take 30.
Okay.
What I was really thinking about, my inner monologue was, oh, we need some of that. I know you're talking about urban circumstances often and so on, but I think all of us sitting here in the front row from Chile and Argentina, we're all thinking about, I know, hold that thought. We can use this in nature, in conservation, and I don't even know how to articulate what those things were, but I recognized them as something that, as Jack said yesterday, there are 4 words that he applies to himself, and I think to team members, and whatever he does is at the same time. And I feel like I've been doing that my whole life. When we started Patagonia, yes, we're causing trouble with nature by the nature of the fabrics we use. And so at the same time, start the other side of Patagonia, which was trying to mitigate whatever we were doing on the front side. And I feel that more strongly than ever, that we have the opportunity to do a lot of things at the same time. And in the absence of that, life is a whole lot less interesting. And we're so desperate to be able to juggle more than one ball in the air at a time because we have this ecological crisis out in front of us. And yes, of course, life keeps churning in the human world as well. So anyway, I had a very busy morning this morning because I was calculating.
At the same time.
At the same time.
Preparing and calculating. Now, these 4 words are my new favorite 4 words. I told Chris about it yesterday, that while you are working on your mission, whatever that is in life, at the same time, many of you have a family. Or at the same time, you contribute into your community. Or at the same time, you can think about the world. So it's just an interesting, I'm going to make some t-shirts say at the same time. Don't you think that would be?
Yeah, I think
it's what GIS people do. At the same time, they do this and they do that.
Yeah.
So,
it's like making a pie, but while you're making the pie, you're also knitting a sweater. You burn the pie, but the sweater's done.
That's very good. I'll remember that, actually. Not that I make pies. I really don't. Well, Chris, at the same time, let me ask you this question. What can these people do to help you?
Oh, God. I really mean this. I can't articulate it, but I can say one thing, that we're trying to build an army. Within Esri, you're trying to build an army. And you're trying to improve so many things. And it can be urban, it can be anywhere on Earth. And I think we make our lives so much more interesting and purposeful if we're working on things that have nothing to do with ourselves. And I can tell you that everywhere on Earth where there are rivers and everything we love about the non-human world, that world needs you guys. I'm telling you, whether it's very clear or it's foggy. Protecting nature and developing the human project is a full-time job, trying to carry both of these. It's one world, but they behave at the moment as two different worlds. And I really think it's people like you guys who have the possibility to stitch it back together again. And in the absence of doing that, then who are we? 100 years from now, if we can arrive 100 years from now with natural systems more or less intact, but also human dignity and health and welfare, and what else? What are we working toward if it is not the goodness and health of all life? And I often get asked, well, what can I do? And I have come to answer, well, tell me what you're good at. Tell me what you're good at, Jim. And it can be anything. It can be anything. And you people in this auditorium are full of what you can do more than most segments of society. Pick the one thing you love doing and you are really good at it. And I can tell you, if you get up tomorrow morning and you go out and you find ways to apply that go far beyond whatever it is you're doing in the middle of the night or during the day with your work, that's what we have to do. In the absence of this, we're abdicating, which is a very powerful word. I always thought it was just King Edward. We're abdicating our love of life. Abdication is such a strong word, but that's what we're doing. And I don't think anybody accepts that when we think about it. But what you're doing now, what you were talking about today, which of course I understood very little of it, but I'm smart. I know how to apply things that may or may not be quite right, but I ask more of ourselves than we think we're capable of. That's for sure. Put yourself out on the edge of whatever precipice you're nearby. And before you throw yourself off, and just imagine what you can do beyond and the impacts you have, and surely you guys would have them, if you just add the sense, I'm not going to abdicate life again. I may do very small things. I may hit balls out of the park. It actually doesn't matter. It is joining forces, like not Prince Charles, King Charles today. He was very smart about this. He knew he had to be king eventually, but he used his position and his heart and his talent toward creating a world that would be just and beautiful. It's just taking what we know, what we take for granted, and committing ourselves to working against those things that will not lead anybody toward a world that we're proud of, perhaps we can't live in. So, a lot of people ask me, do I have hope? And I say, the only reason you're asking me, Jim, if I have hope is because you're hoping I'm going to say yes, and then you won't have to worry. I think that's how it works. But I'm kind of tired of the word hope, with the exception of Jane Goodall, who can use it for the next 4,000 years because she taught us all an active version of hope. I'm not an optimist. I'm a pessimist. But I'm driven by pessimism, and I want to be found wrong. And I think hope has to be a muscle. You have to earn hope. I think we have to work for it. We can't just have hope because it feels better than not having it. I think we have to earn the right to have hope for all life and for the goodness in our individual lives. That's what I think. And never abdicate the possibility of having it all. Never settle for less, in my opinion. He's going to give me the hook any minute now.
I'm not.
So I would just also like to say that people I've worked with in Chile and Argentina, some of the principals are sitting right up here in the front. And
you should have them stand.
Yeah, everybody from the US, and one of them's in the back who ran the show, Heather. Bravo!
Bravo!
And I would also like to say that when Jack and I had lunch together with a couple of the team members from Chile about 2 months ago or so in Beverly Hills, and he was sort of asking, well, what are you thinking about these days? And I said, we're going to blow the seams out. We're going to go on a continental scale because we have to. We look at the externalities and that climate, all the things we know about are changing very quickly at a velocity we hadn't really understood. So just looking at external factors and knowing we had to change move the goalposts out for the things we need to accomplish. And Jack immediately said, hang on, the Esri people in Colombia, just a second, I have to step out and call the Esri people in Colombia because of the the Andean condors, and I'll be right back. And pretty soon he just exploded. He was just like, okay, let's see, who else? Esri. Brazil, Ecuador. And before I could eat 4 desserts, which is how many I usually eat.
I think it was only 3.
and groups like National Geographic, Esri, this is complicated to take on, but it's not impossible and it's essential. So we're just shoving the ball a little farther out, and people who really can help change the nature and scale and scope of protecting what's left of nature and bringing it back where necessary. This is not something we can do by ourselves. This is a team sport. It's Esri, it's Nat Geo, it's Rolex, it's all sorts of entities and individuals who say, yeah,
I can do this.
we can do this. We don't know how completely, but we know we have to, and we know we will. And why not throw the holy pass?
You're talking about playing at 100%. That's
Yeah.
the way I describe it.
Oh, yeah, that's nice. Well, now I have two things from you at the same time, and yeah. So I thank you, Jack and Laura, and all the gang here. Holy mackerel. Have to say, when I walked in here today and saw all of you sitting here, I thought, okay, all right, this is a good start. Thank you very much.
Thank you.